It's non-alcoholic, so don't worry. Although it would be fun if it was alcoholic. That'd be a very interesting wrap-up video. Hello and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name is Maddie. If you're new here, hi, welcome, hello. Today we are going to be doing a October and November reading wrap-up. I just decided to combine these 2 months because I didn't get around to doing a October wrap-up, but I did do an October TBR, so we're gonna see if we stuck to that. And we're also gonna see all the books I read in November, so let's just get into it. So in the month of October, I read 5 fantasy books, 3 graphic novels, 1 thriller, 1 romance, and I DNF'd 2 books. So we were kind of all over the place in October, but I did read a total of 10 books, which is more than I thought I was going to get to. On my October TBR, we had Howl's Moving Castle, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent, You Again by Kate Goldbeck, and then this random graphic novel that I ended up getting at the library called When the Lake Burns. I ended up reading 2 of those books and DNFing 1. So the ones that I did not finish are The Nightingale and Howl's Moving Castle. I started listening to Howl's Moving Castle on audiobook and I honestly don't know why I stopped. I do want to read that book eventually, it just didn't happen this month. And I didn't even pick up The Nightingale, honestly. I am 150 pages into that book. I started it a couple months ago and I just suddenly was not in the mood to read it anymore. But I do want to pick it back up soon, like maybe even in December. And then the book that I did not finish is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. If you have seen my fall reading vlog, you have seen my kind of review and why I did not finish it on there. I go into more detail on there, but for now I'm just gonna say that this book just wasn't for me. These characters in this book were just inherently flawed. Is that the right word? But these characters in this book were very, very flawed, and I believe Kate Goldbeck definitely did that on purpose. I can appreciate a flawed character, but in this book, it felt like there was absolutely no character growth, and I definitely prefer a character to grow and learn. This was really realistic in the fact that sometimes it takes people a while to learn and to grow and to realize their bad habits and to be self-aware. So if you like reading about realistic characters like that, I think you might like this book. There are definitely a lot of inappropriate jokes, so just be aware if you're not into that type of thing, if that's not your vibe. I can appreciate a few inappropriate jokes thrown in there, but this was entirely too much for me personally. The main female character in this was a comedian, so she just was constantly making jokes and was just pretty overall unserious, but she was going through hard things that she would just push aside and not learn from or realize that she's doing something toxic, and so I just could not handle it. I got halfway through this book and I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna give this more than a 3-star. It might even be a 1 or 2 stars, so I'm just gonna stop while I'm ahead. As for the books I did get to When the Lake Burns. This was a graphic novel and it had really cool images in it. I also read this in my fall reading vlog. I feel like it's hard in graphic novels to really have a good developed story because there's so little words in it and mostly just images. I feel like it captured the story really well in the images of the forest and the setting. The storyline didn't make much sense. I'm kind of iffy on whether or not I want to rate graphic novels because I feel more like I'm rating someone's art rather than someone's writing, but I did end up giving this a 3-star, not because the artwork was bad, but because the storyline didn't exactly make sense. And I did read Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent, and I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. This book is about a girl named Tasana, and when she was little, her village got raided by these slavers, and she was took in as a slave. From that point, she fought to be freed from her slavery, and she finally got to the point where she was able to pay her way out. After that, things escalate, and she ends up pledging herself to this place called the Orders. She has to be trained to be able to take this test to be able to get into the Orders. It's like this military, and she ends up training with this guy named Maxentarius, which is just a ridiculous name, honestly. I can appreciate it because they do make fun of his name in the book, so I'm just glad that we're aware that that is a very extra name. And there's this good 100 pages that is just their growth as the main love interest in this book. Usually in a fantasy book, if there's a lot going on, you're not getting as much of that connection with the two main characters, but this had some really good development in it, and it was a really good first book in a series. I read The Ashen Sun, which is a novella about the main male character, Max. So this is supposed to be a 4-part novella, but part 1 is the only part that is out right now. I'm honestly not sure the timeline in which she's going to release the rest of them. Part 1 kind of ended in the middle of the story. I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was just one novella, so that was a little disappointing, but it was interesting to get his backstory on what happened before book 1. I think I ended up giving this 3 stars. It was just okay. Moving on to the other books I read in October. The first book I read in October was Finale by Stephanie Garber. I finished the Caraval series, and overall that series I gave a 4-star. It was just so magical and fun, and it's definitely something that's like, it's not too serious, there are stakes in there, but it's more just a fun, light fantasy. This book specifically, I gave 4 stars, I'm pretty sure. The vibes were definitely there, but the plot was a little bit messy. That kind of bumped it down a star for me. The series also gives me an Alice in Wonderland vibe a little bit. This is the 3rd book in the series, so I can't say much about it, but the series as a whole is about this annual carnival that comes to different places in this world. These 2 sisters end up escaping their abusive father, and they were able to get tickets, and so they compete in this carnival where you don't know what is real and what isn't. It's kind of just like a big acid trip, to be honest. You're seeing what's happening through the character's perspective, so you don't know if what they're going through is real or not. It is really cool, and I definitely recommend it. Next, I read The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling, and this was just such a fun little Halloween witchy read. I was saving this book for like 6 months to be able to read specifically in October, and I'm very glad I did. It's about this young witch that ends up accidentally putting a curse on her ex-boyfriend, and then 10 years goes by and he somehow ends up in her town again. They realize that he is cursed and they try to break the curse together. Super cute read, and I would definitely recommend it in the fall time. I ended up giving this 3 stars. Next, I read 5 Survive by Holly Jackson, and I loved this book. I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. I was kind of in this like reading slump where I couldn't figure out what to read, and so I just picked this book up randomly. This book is about 6 teenagers who go on this road trip to Palm Springs for spring break. They end up getting lost, and then their RV breaks down in this super random place they ended up. They had a pop tire. They don't know how it popped. They fixed it, put a spare on, and then suddenly they were being shot at. From there, they have to figure out who this shooter is, why they're shooting at them. All of these characters have different secrets that come out. They kind of go crazy because they're stuck in this RV together, being shot at, don't know if they're gonna die or not. And obviously, it is called 5 Survive, so take that as you will. I just kept reaching for this book. I wanted to figure out what was happening. I read it super fast. I initially rated this 5 stars just because I get excited at the end of thrillers, I guess. But looking back on it now, I wasn't like super attached to the characters. I didn't really think about it after I read it, so I would probably bring that down to 4 stars because for me, thrillers are just like really exciting to read at the time, but they're very rarely ever 5-star reads. This is a YA thriller, but it honestly doesn't really read like one, except in the fact that they are teenagers. I would recommend this, and honestly anything by Holly Jackson as well. Next book I read is Marked by Destiny by Maggie Lynn. This is an indie published book that just came out like a month ago. I started reading this the day it came out because this is by a friend on TikTok of mine. I have watched her journey of writing this book, and I was so excited for it to finally come out. This book is about a girl named Ira, and in this world, people get birthmarks behind their ear that marks their destiny, hence the title. But our main character, Ira, does not have one behind her ear. She actually has faded ones all over her body. At the start of the book, it is her 19th birthday. This guy comes to the door basically saying that he's going to whisk her away to this training village called Stoneglass. And of course, this guy is hot. Basically, throughout the story, we are heavily in Ira's perspective, so she has no idea what's going on for a lot of this book, honestly. So you are discovering what is happening and getting the answers with her. I ended up giving this 4.75 stars. I really liked this book. I think it was so original. I think it was so well done. The only thing is that I wish we could have gotten a little bit more of a backstory, a little bit more answers, but I assume that's coming in the second book. I 100% recommend you go read this, especially if you are looking to support more indie authors. This is a great place to start if you are looking for a new and original fantasy. I also read Heartstopper 1 and 2 because reading a graphic novel got me curious to read the Heartstopper books, which I know are super popular. It's basically about these two guys that are just trying to get through high school and they're exploring themselves. Honestly impressed with how much information and character growth are in these graphic novels because, like I said earlier, having developed characters and a good storyline is very hard to have in a graphic novel because, you know, there's only the speech bubbles and you only get so much, but these were very, very well done. So I'm very happy that I read them, and I'm definitely going to read the rest of them and maybe even watch the show. The last book I read in October is Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and I really, really like this one too. This book is about Cigna, and she sees death. She sees people who are dead. She can talk to Death himself, and Death seems to follow her everywhere she goes. And I was confused for a second because Death at first was just this like shadow to her. He was kind of just like an annoyance in her life, but then they end up teaming up together because they want to solve this murder that happened. The plot twist at the end of this book definitely got me, and I thought I knew who the murderer was for like half the book, but I was wrong, which was a pleasant surprise. This has a really good gothic vibe. I've heard it described as a gothic fantasy, I'm pretty sure. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit darker, it's a murder mystery, it's set in socialite London, it's just honestly a really fun read. Honestly, I didn't have many complaints about it. It just didn't feel like a 5-star to me. Finally, we had one more DNF in October. I started The Familiar. I only got like 50 pages into it, and I was planning on finishing it. I just never got around to it, and I don't know if I'm gonna end up getting around to it. I'm really not sure how I feel about this book. So I love Leigh Bardugo. She is one of my auto-buy authors. I will always buy her books, but this one was very, very different for her. If I ever read it, it's gonna take me a little bit to get used to the different writing style, but I am still interested in it. But just not right now, I guess. I wanted to read this in October, but it just didn't end up happening, so I might try to revisit it next year. What I got from the 50 pages that I read, it's about this girl, I'm pretty sure her name is Luzia, Luzia. I'm sorry, Luzia? I was just calling her Louisa, to be honest. She's working as a scullion maid, and she uses these little miracles just to make her life a little bit easier. One day her mistress discovers her doing these little miracles, and she starts using her as basically a performer for her social dinners to try to up her social status. That's pretty much all I know. Dude, the sun has already set and it's 4 o'clock. Moving on to November, I read 4 fantasy books, 2 thrillers, and I DNF'd 1 book. Honestly, over these past couple months, I have DNF'd more books than I have all year. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I think I'm getting more comfortable with not having to finish a book, especially if I know I'm not gonna like it, and save my time for books that I actually do like. First, I started with reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and holy crap, I understand the hype now. This book was so good, and I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, but it had me staring at a wall after I read it. So this book is about Addie LaRue, obviously, and in the world she lives in, there are these gods that you can pray to. And the number 1 rule is to not pray to the gods after dark. This starts off in the 1700s, so she gets swept up into this arranged marriage. She wants nothing to do with it. She just wants to be free to travel and to explore the world and live her life. She ends up running away into the forest on her wedding day. She starts praying to any god who will listen. She was praying as the sun set. She ended up selling her soul to this god. What she wanted was to be able to live her life for as long as she wanted, and when she was done, when she felt like she was done with her life, she would give her soul to this god who deals in trading souls. It's called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue because whenever she comes in contact with someone, if they leave the room, they will not remember her. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I really, really liked it. It is a story that will stick with me. I don't know why I didn't give it 5 stars, honestly. I think it was slow in some parts. I might knock it up to a 5 if I keep thinking about it. Next, I ended up reading Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, and I have to say this was very, very similar to Belladonna. Instead of death, in this one they have the what? The 7 deadly sins. Why? The main character's twin sister ends up mysteriously murdered. So it is a murder mystery like Belladonna 2. These seemed very, very similar. Honestly, a little too similar. And so I think I enjoyed this one a little less because I felt like I already read it. So I did end up giving this one 3 stars. So the main character ends up teaming up with Wrath to try to solve this murder, but she's trying to figure out if Wrath has some other things that he's wanting to get out of this deal that they're in. Next, I read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden, and this was kind of random. I just picked this up and read this on Kindle Unlimited. I had heard someone talking about this and I was just very interested in the storyline. So it's about this girl who has really bad luck with dating, and she ends up finding this guy on a dating app, and they end up dating. He's like her perfect guy. But then she finds out that there is the serial killer that woos girls, dates them, and then kills them. And so she gets suspicious of this guy that she's with. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I could not put this book down from the beginning. But then the end disappointed me so much. It was the stupidest ending ever, I'm gonna be honest. Once I finished it, I was like, what? Next, I read Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. The best way I can describe this book is if the selection had a baby with Throne of Glass. That seemed like a very good pairing for me because I love those 2 books. It fell kind of flat, honestly, and that was very disappointing. I found it very, very entertaining, and this is one of those books that I call my McDonald's books. It's one of those books where you've read it before. You've had it before. You know they're not the best books that you've ever had, but they're consistent. They're good while you're reading it, just like McDonald's is good while you're eating it, but it's not the best thing you've ever read. It's not the best thing you've ever had. But I would recommend this if you want a good McDonald's meal, I guess. If you want a McDonald's read this. It ended in a cliffhanger, which I was actually curious to start the next book, and I did. And this book... This is the book that I DNF'd in November. It used one specific word entirely too much. I cannot say this word, I don't think. It is this word. About after the 10th time that it was used, I couldn't go any further. I got like 150 pages into this. It just was not going in the direction I thought it was gonna go, so I am not gonna finish this series. Unfortunately, the first book was good enough of a read for me. I enjoyed it enough, and that's all I need from it. The last book that I read in November is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, I believe is how you say it. I have been holding on to this book for forever. It's been on my TBR forever, and I'm very, very glad that I ended up reading this. This is about a book who kills... This is about a woman who kills her husband. After she gets caught and put on trial, she refuses to speak. She is put into this mental facility and she is silent. So our narrator is a therapist, and he ends up purposely getting a job at this mental facility to try to unravel this mystery and try to get the woman to speak. The plot twist in this book was crazy. It definitely got me, but at the very end, the last sentence was left off very ambiguously, if that's a word. I know the author did that on purpose, but we are basically left to guess what happens, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I kind of wanted a more definite ending. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. It wasn't my favorite thriller I've read, but it wasn't my least favorite. So I ended up reading 16 books in the months of October and November, and I DNF'd 3 books. I have surpassed my Goodreads reading goal for 2024, which I am happy about. I'm hoping to get over 80 perhaps by the end of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me and hearing me yap about all the books that I've read these past couple of months. I'd love to hear what your favorite book you read in the months of October and November down below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to be besties, I would absolutely love that. And for now, I will see you in my next video. Bye!